Okay, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Verbal Submission Podcast. This is E. Marcel Pursuit, and we're recording on April 13th, 2021. Today's show is focused on one thing only: WrestleMania. Full recap of both nights, throw a little bit of NXT, and that is going to take up our entire show. So I'm looking very forward to recapping all that took place over the really 4 days, if I throw in NXT, in the world of World Wrestling Entertainment. So it's an all professional wrestling show, specifically on WWE. But as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, you can head to the mothership, to sportsinquirer.net. You can listen to the general show on sports that we have called the Sports Inquirer Show. We went over a lot of baseball, a lot of Masters golf, and everything in between. So make sure you check that show out. You can also hear our archives of the Verbal Submission podcast. And the previous show, we did the predictions. And I think I did pretty solid with my predictions. But if you want to go back and listen to the show and compare what I said would happen, or what how you say it? Compare what think would happen and what actually happened. That still doesn't sound right, but you get what I'm saying. Just listen to the show and you can do some comparison of everything on it. And I'll bring up my thoughts of what I thought was going to happen at WrestleMania and what actually did take place throughout the show as well. But make sure you check us out on there. You can also go to our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, under Sports Acquire. That's all one word. And you can get, every time we do an update on the site, it's on our social media platforms, and you'll be able to check out everything that we do. And then finally, subscribe to us on our audio and video providers, including YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes. And search us under Sports Inquirer, and you can follow us, subscribe, and like our content. That'd be really appreciated. And it's also a really good way to, every time we post something, when you subscribe, you get an automatic update or a link or a notice or an alert, however you want to receive it, as far as what we do on the site. So make sure you do all of that just to have a good idea of what we have going on. All right, WrestleMania overall, impressions of it. One, I was happy to actually have a WrestleMania with the crowd and with an audience. That was the biggest thing we were missing in all of professional wrestling. Really, for the most part, I watch Japanese wrestling. If you listen to the show, I go into in-depth details about New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they've been a little bit more, had more fans in attendance. So I've been able to get that experience, not as much as normal because of everything going on in the world. But if you look at professional wrestling in the United States, very limited fan interactions at all. I know AEW, they've had some fans in Daly's Place in Jacksonville during the filming of or the recording of their shows. That's been a little bit of a help. But overall, we have not had the fan attendance that we normally do. So it's good to see a crowd at WrestleMania at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida, where the Buccaneers play the NFL team. And I think they had about 20,000 fans in attendance. That's a pretty solid number. So it's about 25% capacity of what they could have in that stadium. But it's good because, and I know WWE, they try to do a good job with that Thunderdome and all the screens with the fans in there. The part I don't like about it is that they pipe in so much noise, the boos, the cheers, and especially when Roman Reigns, when he talks, you can hardly hear what he's saying because the piped in noise is so strong for the boos that it's very difficult to comprehend what he's saying, and it's not organic. With the WrestleMania crowd, we were able to see some of that with the crowd, people cheering, people booing, people not making much noise. And as I go to a preview, you dealt with that as well. Or go do a recap, I should say, of the show. Some fans did not make reactions, and it all makes sense as I go through the matches. But it was good to have a crowd there. Good to see Mr. McMahon. Good to see Vinnie Mac address the crowd. He looked good and addressed the crowd. Had a good voice. We've seen him make appearances over the past few months, and he hasn't. And I don't know his health, but it hasn't looked as healthy as he had in other situations. Now he's not the Vinnie Mac that we know from the '90s and all that stuff, and you're fired and all that fire. But it was good to see him. He looked good. He looked well. And you can tell he's genuinely happy to have fans in attendance, and all of us were. So that was a good thing. And the pomp and circumstances of the WrestleMania, still putting all the pyro, the big stage. And I put a tweet out there. And look, I have family in Florida. I think everyone has family in Florida. It seems like you have a cousin, a brother, or an aunt or uncle. Somebody's in Florida in your family. You know how Florida is. It's either unbearably hot or there's a thunderstorm coming that looks like the end of the world is upon us. So a lot of times within the same hour. And sure enough, WWE got that the first night of WrestleMania. A rainstorm came through, a thunderstorm. And when you have an outdoor event in Florida, that's going to happen. And I thought they did a good, they tried to work with it, had the promos going. You could tell some people like Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins, some people that are able to do promos on the fly, get their things going. McIntyre was solid. He kind of lost himself a little bit in his promo, but he kind of worked his way around it. MVP is tremendous. He's a pro. He's great on the mic. So you saw some of those people being able to do promos and get themselves over in that regard, kind of a freestyle to kill that 45-minute ish delay because of the weather. But once the show started, I liked it. At first, I didn't like the start of the first night of WrestleMania to be your WWE World Title match, but I thought it was a solid start to the show when it took place. Good for Lashley retaining the title over McIntyre. Lashley's been a tremendous force over the past 6 months in WWE. I don't see a reason why McIntyre and Lashley need to end their feud. We saw Riddle on Raw last night kind of insert himself in there. But I think Lashley is a strong champion, especially with MVP, who has been maybe the manager of the year in all professional wrestling. That Hurt Business is a solid pro. I didn't like when Benjamin, it was, and they broke up the group. But I think if you're going to have Lashley and MVP kind of have their own thing, that's okay. I'm not minding that too much. But just solid start to the match overall. Good wrestling, and it's just a consistent contest. Another consistent contest was Cesaro getting his first solo WrestleMania win. He's been in that promotion 10 years. He's never won a singles match in WrestleMania. He was able to get a win. I think he could be a nice bridge contender for the WWE Championship to face Lashley as you head into the summer. With Cesaro, you know you're not going to get a bad match. He has a very friendly move for the fans to cheer and to swing. But I thought he did a very good job in his match, getting that victory over Seth Rollins. And Rollins will be okay. He's almost Teflon at this point. He's a slimy heel that no one likes. So him losing was not the worst thing in the world. Cesaro, if he lost that match, especially with the promos leading into it about how he never won a WrestleMania match, that's not a career killer. But if you had any hopes of Cesaro being a main event player, that would have been really limited if he lost to to in that match. That was a very good match and a very good win for Cesaro. I like Almost. He looks like a star, and I like his wrestling style. He, along with AJ Styles, was able to win the tag team championships over the New Day. Look, Almost is a legitimate 7-foot guy, a very big build, and he's raw. Not no pun not intended. He's an inexperienced wrestler, and I think that works in his case. And we'll get NXT. We'll touch on this, but I'll bring it up now. When you have a big guy like a Bronson Reed, who is a big wrestler, strong, really tough, and he's doing moonsaults and trying to jump in the top over the top rope and do all these luchador moves, it really is counterproductive to a big man wrestler. Almost, he can't do all that stuff because he's inexperienced. So what are they relying on? A lot of power moves. Things he can do in the ring. He might go again, run the ropes a little bit to get some power to do a clothesline or things like that. But a lot of body slams, a lot of chokes, maybe a leg drop here and there. That's good for him to work in that way in his as he develops. And working with AJ Styles, one of the best technical wrestlers in the world, he's going to be able to develop and build that up. Him being a tag champion is a good thing. He doesn't have to carry a singles match by himself yet. AJ can do all of the hard work and almost can go in there and get his power moves in. I really like that combination as a group. And once again, they were able to win those tag titles from the New Day. I like that. What I did not like was that Shane McMahon Braun Strowman match. And I put on Twitter once again. By the way, I mentioned Twitter and social media a lot of times. During these matches, I'm tweeting stuff and I can call a lot of stuff. I've been a professional wrestling fan for over 30 years. And literally, I turned 40 in a month. I've been watching wrestling on a consistent basis since I was 6, 7 years old. Legitimate. And we can go down there. All the history of me watching wrestling and all that stuff. Point is, you can tell just by the matchup what you're going to see. And I knew that Shane and Braun were going to battle it out. Shane was going to take a stupid bump that he did not need to take. And this was actually one of the safer ones he's taken, relatively speaking. Going over, and is okay, there's a cage involved. There has to be a cage, of course, or Hell in the Cell. Shane got to the very top of the cage. Braun pushed him off. He took the slam in the took the bump off the cage into the ring. Braun pinned him. Look, Shane's a man. He's in his 50s now. I don't need to see him doing all these crazy bumps. It's unnecessary. Now Braun got over. Yes, I know he's the big man, and now you see him Braun maybe make his presence felt in the world title picture against Lashley. I would not be mad at that at all. But Shane does not need to be doing these bumps. It's very unnecessary and it's very predictable. I did not like that match at all. A match I was pleasantly surprised by was the Bad Bunny match with Damian Priest. They were able to get a win over Morrison and Miz. This was another prediction I made before the match even took place. There is no way you're going to bring Bad Bunny, an international superstar, a legitimate one, known around the world, and all that they've been pushing him so hard, and he's yielded some good attention and results for WWE. There was no way he was going to lose that match. He really shouldn't lose that match, and he didn't. What I was surprised by, I thought the route that they would go is that Damian Priest would do a lot of the work in the match against Morrison and Miz because he's the professional wrestler and Bad Bunny is the music entertainer. He's not a professional wrestler. They went the reverse. Bad Bunny started the match and was in the majority of the contest and was putting in some good moves. He's a little guy, but he looks athletic. He looks like he's in decent shape, and he had some good stamina, and that's a lot to deal with. We've seen a lot of celebrities that are professional athletes in other walks of life, and they go into the wrestling ring, they get nervous, they blow up, they lose energy, they lack stamina. Bad Bunny did not have that at all. And I'm not saying he's, Ric Flair 2.0, all time, but he did a very good job. The Canadian Destroyer and the on the floor I did pop on that. I was excited by that move. I liked seeing that. But I don't, and he shouldn't be wrestling every single week. If you want to save him for SummerSlam, and that's the next major pay per view later on in the summer, I'd be cool with that. But don't put him in every single match at all. But I like seeing Bad Bunny in that contest. He pleasantly surprised me. Now, as I say, he shouldn't be an everyday wrestler. He shouldn't be fighting for a belt. But if he can still keep this promo going, or this feud with Morrison and Miz, that would not be the worst thing in the world. I was not mad at that. And to wrap up night one of the show, man, there were so many layers to this one. The Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks match for the Women's Championship. When I first watched the match, I did not like it. And there are several reasons I didn't like it. And I'll go over those upon my second viewing and why I like the match a little bit more. But the overarching thing reason I think I didn't like the match initially is not one of my three tenets. It was the fact that it was the last match of the show. And we were pushing 4 hours of watching wrestling in one night. Look, we all like wrestling. If you're listening to this show, you enjoy it for a lot of reasons. But man, to sit through anything, for 4 hours is tough. A professional sporting event, your favorite movie, a favorite play, whatever, maybe whatever. It is very hard to sit through 4 hours of anything in one sitting. And by the time we got to this match, I was burnt out as far as watching the wrestling. So I think my attitude coming into it was I was tired, honestly, just with the placement of this match. If this match was maybe a little bit earlier in the show on my first viewing, I probably would have liked it a little bit more. But let's get to the reasons I did not like the match and at first viewing, and it improved in my second viewing. First reason I didn't like the match was Bianca Belair crying before the match even started. Look, I know she's a babyface, and I know she's got a really good story. You can look it up, and they promoted it. You know, track athlete in college, went to NXT, built herself up, won the Royal Rumble, number one contender. Really solid story. She's very likable. But this is professional wrestling, and the fact that, and I would say the same thing about a man, is this isn't a woman thing at all. But to enter the ring before the match even starts and you're crying with excitement or overcome with emotions, you gotta shut that down. And to be fair, and this was my second viewing, she shut that down, fought the match, and did a very good job. But when I first saw that, first time I saw the match, I was like, what is she doing crying? Woman up. Like, and I know she's a face, you can smile, you can be excited, but man, to be crying like that, I don't want to see that from any competitor. You don't see any fighter in the UFC crying with excitement because they're in the championship match. You don't see very rarely, if ever, do you see any professional athlete before their competition starts crying. They cry afterwards, and that's cool. But before the match even starts, come on now. I did not like that at all. But as I said, she turned that off and fought a really good match, and that was cool. The second reason I didn't like the match was Michael Cole. And this leads to the commentary. It has really taken a nosedive over the past 5, 10 years in WWE. And I'm not yearning for the days of King and JR and Jim Ross and all that stuff. But man, it is hard listening to Saxton and Cole and even Corey Graves, who I thought was a very good announcer in NXT, and he has regressed in a major, major way. And they got JBL, who I despise on the mic. Look, he's a Hall of Famer and all that stuff, and whatever. But I do not like him on the mic at all. Even Booker T, we love Booker T, but even when he does commentary, it's like ugh. But those guys come in every once in a while. Even King, those are like they come in once every before pay-per-views, whatever. But Cole is just annoying as crap. And the fact that he brought up at the beginning match, this is the first time we've seen two African American or two black women fighting for a world championship. Look, it was a big story on Twitter or on social media. I got hit up with that stuff. And as a black man, look, and as I put on my Twitter, I could do a dissertation on the race issues in professional wrestling, particularly WWE over the years or currently. And we'll get to Apollo Crews and Big E. I get it that blacks or minorities really in professional wrestling and in WWE has not been the best, have not been promoted the best. So when you have, yes, two black women in the main event of WrestleMania for a championship, that's very good. That's a tremendous situation going on. But I do not need Michael Cole when I'm watching the match and getting ready for it to tell me that. I can see it. 90% of the audience watching it knew that beforehand, or they could probably figure it out 99.9% when the match is going on, can say, oh, okay, those are two black women fighting for a championship. You don't have to be woke and tell me before the match even begins. That I did not like at all. And that really turned me off to the match. And that leads me to the second and third points, kind of the same, was the commentary. Very, very bad. So you know what I did the second time watching the match? I turned off the commentary. And the bad part, not a bad part when you turn off the commentary, you lose crowd reaction and you lose a little bit of the verbal jousting between the competitors. But in this case, it was worth because I saw it the first time, so I know what they were saying and all that. Watching the match in silence was I got to see the actual execution of the contest, and it was much better. And both those women did a very good job in the contest. I had a feeling Belair would win because you can really Sasha's going to come back and get a nice little feud going. And Belair, as I said, this has been her moment for the past few months. I mentioned her coming up through NXT and it has got a lot of support. So I didn't mind her winning at all, and then seeing her family. Now that's the time you can cry when she won the match and you saw her family and all that stuff. That's cool. I don't mind. That's beautiful. That's a good thing. But yeah, when she cried beforehand, I was like, ugh, I don't like that at all. But as I said, I watched the match a second time and I thought it was really good. So the first night came off pretty well. We moved to night two, and we start off with Randy Orton versus The Fiend. I can't do the cartoonish stuff with this. Randy Orton literally burned this man to a crisp. Bray Wyatt should be dead. There's no like speculation and we've seen and look, I would grow up in the Undertaker with those casket matches. They put him in the casket, then they open it up, and then he would disappear. Where did he go? And all this, and Kane and I'm used to hocus pocus in wrestling, but when the man is literally burnt to a crisp, not supposed to expect him to be fighting again in only a few weeks, you turn me off to it. And then the box like structure. Darn it, say it's a box. And Saxton had me mad with that, and Michael Cole. It's a box like structure outside, and that's the box that Bray Wyatt or the Fiend popped out of and fought and all this stuff. Call it a freaking box. Like it that had me so annoyed when just like and there are different things. Like with WWE, they don't go to a hospital; they go to a medical facility. They don't fight for a championship belt. They fight for an opportunity to win a title. It's like but a box like structure. It's a darn box. That had me mad. The whole is Alexa Bliss. She's possessed or not? All this other stuff, and you have the Fiend. As I said, this guy is like a magic character. He's been burned. All this other stuff. Randy Orton puts one RKO on him and pins him like he's a normal wrestler, like he's a normal mortal human. What was that ending? I don't get that at all. That really grinded some major gears, for me. So that starts that match or the start to WrestleMania with on night two. That made me mad. The women's tag match, but Tamina and Natalia fighting for the tag titles looking to win the championships from the champions in Nia Jax and Shayna Basler. That match was about 5 minutes too long. Nia Jax is a bad wrestler. Shayna Basler, who's a legit shooter and can do some things, she's regressed tremendously. Tamina actually looks good, and Natalia, she's a solid hand, a solid wrestler. She's good. So on paper, you have two solid wrestlers, one one really good wrestler if they booked her right in Basler, and one awful wrestler in Nia Jax. And that was just a match that was way too long. I have really not much to say positive from that contest. The turn of improvements started coming with that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn match. That was a solid contest. And you knew those guys have been wrestling forever. I mean, they grew up together. They've been in hundreds of matches. So you knew the chemistry would be there. Had Aaron Paul there, the YouTube star. I thought they should have done more with him. I know at the very end of Kevin Owens won the match, by the way. And after the contest, he kind of turned on Zayn and all this other stuff. I thought that Paul should have gone in the ring, cut a promo talking crap about Zayn and all this other stuff, and then Owens could have put the stunner on him. a little bit after that. So but you basically had Aaron Paul there, who is a legitimate YouTube star. Millions of people know who he is, and he's just sitting ringside, not doing much. I'm not saying you had to be like Bad Bunny and do be the actual match, but at least after the match, cut a promo, talk to your stuff because he talks a lot of crap. He's a boxer. He likes to he wants to fight Floyd Mayweather and McGregor and all this other stuff. Conor McGregor, the UFC fighter, and he just didn't do anything with it. Logan Paul was just there, and he took a good stunner. I'll give him that, and it looked like a legitimate stunner from someone who's not a professional wrestler. You see somebody, and we've seen stunners taken by guys like The Rock and others. They do flips and turns and oversell it. Logan Paul took it well. It was a stunner that you're not a professional athlete and you take that type of move, you just go down to the ground flat. That was good. But I thought they should have done more with Logan Paul there as far as getting him to talk and get his stuff over before he was stunned. Cruz defeated Big E in the drum match. It was a stiff match. I like that. They were both very physical. The Apollo Cruz thing, and as I said, and I've said in other shows, and I'll reiterate it, I don't mind him being Nigerian and then doing a Nigerian accent if he started in WWE with that character development. Now, if you knew him before WWE, when he was Izuha Nation and he wrestled independently in other promotions, the Nigerian stuff is legitimate. That's not fake. It's not like he's not African and all of a sudden he says he's African and using the Nigerian accent. That'd be beyond insulting. So that's in him, but the fact that he's been Apollo Crews from Georgia, you're not an American and not using an accent at all, and then all of a sudden he wants to use an accent. It's very confusing. I don't think it's racist necessarily, because as I mentioned, that's really his background. But just to throw that different twist on him and his character is very odd. But I thought the match was okay. Both guys are big, strong guys. They fought very physically. I don't like the interference by the mystery big man. It's in that type of moment in a WrestleMania. If you're gonna do an interference like that, it's gotta be a known entity because you spend the whole time. Who is this guy? Where is he from? Is he a developmental? I think he's an NXT guy. But you're thinking about this in the middle of the match. That's not a good thing. So I didn't like that part of the match, but I thought the actual contest before that mystery big man interfering in the end was okay. Rhea Ripley beating Asuka for the women's title, very deserved move. Ripley has become a really solid figure in WWE. She has star written all over her. She has a great look, great build. Her wrestling's improving every time she's in the ring. As I said, she's attractive in that regard to men and women, but she also is not just like your typical generic wrestler that you've seen in WWE. So she's very attractive and appealing to all genders, all people involved. And she's a bigger wrestler, so she holds herself. So her build is really good. And she has, I said, she could be a major star. I liked her beating Asuka. We got to see her and Charlotte fight again. I thought last year's WrestleMania, that may have been the best match of all of last year's WrestleMania. Charlotte was not on this year's card for whatever reason. Search the internet, you can see why. But Charlotte cut a really good promo on Raw last night. So I really want to see Ripley and Charlotte get back in the ring against each other, and that's a good thing. So I thought Ripley winning that match was solid. Roman Reigns retained his Universal Championship with the win over Daniel Bryan and Edge. I didn't like. I thought if it was just Edge and Reigns, that would have been better. I thought that would have been more focused on those guys. When you have a 3-man match, you're looking all over the place, and those three guys are pros, so they carried it off, I think, pretty well. But it's just you have too much action going on to keep up with those type of matches. I don't like Uso continuing to stick his neck into these matches. Reigns is a badass in his own right. He does not need his cousin interfering in these matches, trying to give Roman Reigns an advantage. I know he's the right hand man now and all that other stuff, but Reigns can hold his own. He's all right. But I thought the match was well done. Nasty chair shots at the end, and him pinning both Roman Reigns pinning both Daniel Bryan and Edge, both of them at the same time, really puts Roman Reigns as he's the not to be cliche. I mean, he's the head of the table. He is the man in all of WWE. I don't know who his next contender is going to be, but this is the Reigns that he's now. We've seen so many start and stops with Reigns. We saw him with the Shield, with Dean Ambrose, and with Seth Rollins, and he really established himself as a potential superstar in that group. Then the group breaks up, and Reigns is put in a lot of positions, being forced into the limelight to fans. They did not like it at all. He was booed quite often, and he'd have moments of good and bad, but we would watch him, or at least I would, and say, "This man is." You look at the muscle. You look, and he took the bulletproof vest thing off. I'm like, the man is jacked. He's cut. He's got the tattoos. He's got the Samoan or the Polynesian background. We know his family tree and his family line. This guy needs to be just a kick butt, no questions asked type of guy. And over the past half of a year, with the assistance of Paul Heyman as his advocate, he has really taken. It's not necessarily, but and that's the thing people always say. He needs to be a bad guy, turn bad. That's part of it. I get what you say when you're saying that. I comprehend that, but it's really more about him being more aggressive and being more assertive and just taking what he wants. And is that's where it's is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? It leans towards the heelish side of things, but you see him. You got boos, but he also got cheers as well. I think you just see when your guy looks like Roman Reigns, just go in there and be the baddest man in the on the block. That's all you want to see, and he has done that in a very big way. So I think that him winning was deserved and was a good way to end WrestleMania. And as I said, outside of a few hiccups, so the Orton and Fiend match, I didn't care too much for. That women's tag match was a little bit too long. I thought it was a solid WrestleMania overall. Is it like an all-time great? I gotta look at the archives and rank all the WrestleManias over the years, from WrestleMania 30 to 3 to 12 and all that. I don't want to say it's the top five all time, but it's in the top half of all time WrestleManias as far as what you're looking at. All right, let's touch on NXT real quick, and we'll conclude this show. Ciampa and Walter was my favorite match out of everything that took place, probably in the entire weekend. I mean, Walter is. I was talking to my uncle just about a few hours ago, going over WrestleMania. He might be a top five current wrestler in WWE, and that's a lot to say with the depth of that roster. And the NXT United Kingdom champion is in my top five. That's legitimate, though. He is. It's just his look. It doesn't look like he should be able to be a top flight wrestler. I like the plain tights, kind of the weird fade haircut. He's not very. I mean, he's a big man, but he's not muscular at all. And he is just he carries himself as a champion. I love it. Champa is a tough SOB as well. But in that match, I thought came off really well. Killian Cross being the new WWE NXT champion, defeating Finn Balor. I like that he has the belt again. Remember, he won the championship, but then hurt his shoulder, had to drop the belt. Finn Balor ended up winning it, and Finn did a very solid job of carrying that belt. But Cross is the guy with his manager Scarlett. That is a that the visuals of them are very, very good. So I like Cross winning that championship. Mercedes winning the women's championship, good move. I like her being the champion. She's kind of everything I said about Rhea Ripley. Mercedes fits in that mold as well. She's once again Ripley's further ahead developmentally as far as in ring and even talking. But I think that Mercedes has a chance to be a really good champion. NXT is a good spot for her to be in, and I think that's going to be a really good situation for her. A match that I watched a little upon second review that I liked the first time and maybe a little bit less in the second viewing. Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly. I like the match because we've seen these unsanctioned, no holds barred type of contests before, and it becomes comical. You see a bunch of blood. You don't see a lot of realistic moves. It becomes kind of cartoonish, video game-ish. I thought Cole and O'Reilly is like if this was a legitimate fight between two guys and it had these type of rules, whether it's in the bar or on a field or in a boxing ring or a MMA cage, that'd be the type of match you would see. You'd see some blood, but it would be for reasons. It wouldn't be just because you have a bunch of thumbtacks where you brought out like a scissors or something just to get blood to gig somebody in a cartoonish way. I like the use of the chain. The whole they did that move where both of them fell through the stage. That was a little hokey for me, but I did like the fact that they exited the stage. Usually, like not on top, not through the hole, but it created a hole on the side. Cole kicked the hole on the side, got out, dragged O'Reilly. I like that was a nice little twist to that, but it was a little bit too long. It was 40 minutes. If you shave off about 10 minutes of that, because look, even the most experienced fighter, and yes, I know you bring up Gracie and Sakuraba fighting for an hour, but that was MMA, that was grappling, a little bit different than what these guys were doing. If you're gonna have that type of match, it's not gonna in real life, it's not gonna last 40 minutes. I'll give you 25 minutes, maybe even 30. But when you get into that 40-minute range, it does drag a little bit. And O'Reilly won. That's a good thing because Cole is kind of like Seth Rollins, where not necessarily a made man, but Cole will be okay. He can work his way back into a championship picture and find himself on the top of the card. O'Reilly is the man that really needed to establish himself because he's the one that's striking out on his own. I mean, Cole broke up the Undisputed Era, but O'Reilly's the one that's trying to build himself up into a championship contender or a main event guy. So O'Reilly winning the championship in that scenario, or winning this match over Cole, was a good thing as far as the continued development of O'Reilly. And it's gonna be very interesting. We watched the Raw after WrestleMania yesterday on Monday as we're recording this. Not much news, and it's very tough because Raw after WrestleMania, we usually see a lot of surprises. People come up from NXT. You see some new feuds starting up, and just the circumstances the way they are, we didn't see too much of that. NXT is now tonight on Tuesdays, and I'm very interested to watch tonight's show. We're going to do a show on Thursday afternoon or evening after NXT and after AEW, and I'm very intrigued to see how NXT treats their NXT after WrestleMania situation and what's going on there. So I'm very intrigued by what we'll see tonight. And on our next show, we'll go over all that stuff. All right, thanks for listening to today's show and our recap of WrestleMania, including NXT. If you want to listen to more of our shows, head to thesportsinquirer.net. You can also go to our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Sports Inquirer. And finally, head to your audio and video providers, including YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, and search for us under the Sports Inquirer. Until next time, good fight, good night, be safe.